Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Very happy to welcome you at the international conference, which is called Stimulation of Investments for Mobilization of the Economy. More than 150 delegates are taking part in this event, including investment bankers, heads of the big enterprises, of bodies, agencies. This conference is devoted to the 10th anniversary of the development of the Bank of Development, which is very supported for the industrial development of the country. Bank has financed more than 85 investment projects to the total volume of funding for more than $10.5 billion. Today, when the government is implementing the President's strategic plan for innovative development of the state enterprises is very important, and at the conference we shall discuss these issues, and that's why I propose to pass over to the plenary session, which is devoted to the topic the institutional support as a major factor for development. To start our plenary session, let me give the floor to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Karim Kazhikhanovich Masimov. Good morning. Before I pass over to the speech, let me read the welcoming speech of the head of our country, Nursultan Abishevich Nazarbayev. I want to say a couple of words. First of all, I don't know how the organizers of this event were able to arrange everything for today, but today from the very morning we have heard a good news that following the increase of the sovereign rating of the Republic of Kazakhstan, yesterday Standard & Poor's decided to increase the crediting rating of our country, and I congratulate all of us with this very important news. Second, in the ever-changing world, the role of the state institutions, the role of the impact of the government, of the state economic policy are considered in a different light. We are looking at the processes which are happening in the global economy and the situation in the Eurozone. Quite recently, based on the task of the head of our country, the issues related to the further development and the impact of the global situation on our country were discussed widely at two big events, such as the board of the heads of the states of the single economic space. 2 days ago, the principal new decisions were made. We shall conduct consultations on the combined policy in order to prevent and to combat the crisis situations, and possibly we shall have to take some inadequate actions to respond in time to ever-rising challenges. We created the working groups at the levels of the Ministry of Economy, which have started their work. And I think that the role in such situations of such institutions as the state banks will be considered in a different view. Their role and significance is very important. And I think that at our meeting, during the discussions, very important ideas will be announced, which will help us to develop further at a better level. Now, let me to read out the welcoming speech on behalf of the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. To the participants of the conference devoted to the 10th anniversary of the Bank of Development of Kazakhstan, dear participants and guests of the conference, in May 2001, based on my task, the government created the Bank for Development of Kazakhstan, and today, on the eve of the 20th anniversary of independence, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the creation of the bank. If you look what has been done by the bank for these 10 years, huge work has been done, and the results of which are visible today. The bank participates in various projects in support to development of Kazakhstan, such as Atyrau refinery, gas and chemical industry, metallurgical combines. The bank is acknowledged by the foreign investment organizations and shows the attractiveness of the business climate in Kazakhstan, supports the attraction of investments to Kazakhstan, and it has done its work not only in good times, but it was resilient during the crisis and continued to fund to the economy of Kazakhstan. Within 10 years, there were successes and were failures, of course, but we need to learn the lessons and to make the conclusions so as we can continue the on-forward development. And I'm sure that today's conference, where two prominent people have been invited to participate, will become the platform for discussions, and all the most actual problems for the industrial development of Kazakhstan will be discussed, and the proposals will be made about the further development of Kazakhstan. I wish constructive work and fruitful results for your conference. Nursultan Nazarbayev, thank you. Thank you very much for your speech, dear participants. Unfortunately, to the tight and busy schedule, our Prime Minister has to leave. Thank you for your speech, and I propose to make a small break. Please don't leave the room. Let us continue our plenary session. Today, we had the welcoming speech, which was read by the Prime Minister of the head of the country. And I want to say you that the bank has played the role of the locomotive in terms of the attraction of the foreign capital and implementation of our projects, and more than 70% of the projects are absolutely new projects, startup projects, the majority of which cannot find the support on behalf of the commercial banks. And yesterday, as the Prime Minister said, agency of Standard & Poor's talked about the increase of the rating, because HBS benchmarking. I want to state, dear participants, that today we can state about the good corporate management. There is a good, well-balanced structure of the board of directors. Half of them are independent directors who are experienced people and professionals. It's the first president when half of the board of directors are directors independent. In the structure of the assets, the credits make more than 10%. As it has been said, the bank had problematic projects, but given the total economic situation, it's not maybe that indicative, but there are still some things to do for the management. Today at the conference we shall discuss a wide range of issues. So we'll talk about the macroeconomic situation in Kazakhstan, about the role of diversification of the economy, and human resources as a key factor for development of the economy, investment potentials of the regions. And we have the heads of the regions today who have come to make their presentations about the investment opportunities, and the most important issue is implementation of the investment projects in Kazakhstan. In the second half of the day, we shall have a business games, and today at the plenary session, let me welcome the participants for the plenary session. Kairat Kelimbetov, Minister for Economic Development and Trade of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Frank From Italy, Mr. Sumitro Duba, representative, professor of business technologies, and at the beginning of the session, Prime Minister Mr. Masimov made a welcoming speech. I propose to start our discussion, and I give the floor for the first discussion issue to the Minister of Economy, to Kairat Kilimbetov. Thank you very much for the given floor today. So many good words would be said in address to the bank, to the staff of the bank for development. But let me focus on those moments which were supportive and which made the background for development of this institution. As you remember, today we are celebrating the 10th anniversary for the Bank of Development, but if you recall what was 10 years ago, it was the year 2001. From the point of view of the rate of the economic growth, we remember that the year 2001 was the first year of accession of our country, of coming of our country from the deep crisis, which happened in the 90s. At the same time, it was the first year when, for the first time, we started to think about the rational use of the resources like oil and gas and the revenues. And you remember that the year 2001, we made two very important decisions, as I think. First of all, the National Fund was created, where the first $600 million were transferred, and today in the National Fund, in the reserve fund of our country, the fund for the future generations, we have $40 billion. So we must save the money, oil money, but not to waste it. At the same time, we know that the money of the National Fund are invested abroad, mainly. It's a conservative strategy, but we needed the money for the internal market development, and the decision was to create the Bank for Development. And in the year 2003, a decision was made to create a network of institutions for development, among which we had the Investment Bank, the Capital Management, the Center for Marketing and Analytical Studies, and in the year 2003, the first stage of the industrial strategy started to be implemented, and now we are talking about the new stage, post-innovative strategy. But the year 2001 is the historic date. 600 million so was transferred to the authorized capital for the Bank of Development. What was the mechanism? How the money was supposed to be spent? In those days, there were so many disputes at the government, and the decision was made that the money will be spent to capital, and the money cannot be spent on implementation of the investment projects, but we must attract borrowings for certain tasks. And now there are a lot of disputes about the topic of modernization, diversification. Quite often development institutions are criticized, and people ask how is the money spent. But for the experts and journalists, I want to say the mechanism of spending the money is capitalization for the Bank of Development, and the money is all within the bank. But for the under this capital, we attract borrowings, and so this way we get additional effect through the return of investments. And you remember that in the year 2003 there were so many disputes whether the Bank of Development must be competitive with the private banks, and it was said that the Bank of Development must have its own niche, it must intervene with the activity of the commercial banks. Maybe it was correct, and the decision was made that the project must be funded for long-term projects, and for about $5 million. And honestly, in the year 2001, 2003, it was very difficult to find such projects. If you look at the history of projects, so we didn't have such projects today. Maybe 5 million projects are very small projects for the bank, because the bank started to fund the projects with the cost of $1 billion. As you see, the bank has a special niche system. So many disputes about what projects should be funded by the Bank of Development, and whether they should be co-funding by the commercial banks. And the Prime Minister, in his speech and in the welcome speech of the head of the country, it was mentioned that there were good things and failures, but I think these are not errors. These are the lessons learned by the bank in its history of development. and pertaining to this co-funding, from my point, the bank must not fund the majority of the banks. It must get the co-funding from the commercial banks for the projects, and this problem has various types and various aspects, but the bank must not take all the risks. The risks should be shared with other organizations, and as the time showed, this is the most important element in the risk management. The next issue is whether the Bank of Development can replace all commercial banks, and should it do it or not. But the time showed that the Bank of Development has its own issue. All the projects that are funded by the Bank of Development, they are, as a rule, 70% of them, as the Prime Minister said, are funded. General banks will not go there, and there should be some institute which can take this burden on itself. If we go back to the year 2008, the Bank of Development was a key instrument in saving and refunding for many projects, and in support to the banking sector, and refunding for a huge number of loans, practically for $0.5 billion. The projects were funded, and there were so many disputes about it too, but the life showed that the decisions were good, right, and we helped to solve the problem, to ensure sustainability of the economy. Also, it was not very easy to make a decision. If you remember, in the year 2009 and 10, when the Bank of Development played against a key role in the attraction of additional $5 billion of the Chinese loan, and you remember that the head of the country agreed about $10 billion, 5 for the oil and gas sector, and 5 for the rest of them, and Bank of Development of Chinese to attract the Chinese money, and it showed a high reputation of this financial institution. The next issue is the issue of funding for the project. It's often said that the Bank of Development gave a lot of money, allocated a lot of money, but where is the project? I want to provoke a discussion. Let's call the more or less significant projects we heard about and the opening of which happened with the participation of the top management of the country, which really within these years got a huge impulse for development. If I list them: Актюбринген, Агромаш Холдинг, KDB, Kaustik in Pavlodar region, Mainakskaya hydro station. These are the projects which are the flagmates in this strategy for the forced industrial development, and these are the projects which were structured and funded by the Bank for Development. And I think that it's a huge contribution of the Bank of Development in the diversification of the country economy. It's sort of an icebreaker. It must not and it cannot replace the whole program for diversification, but it plays its own significant role. It has been said that the financial institution has a higher rating, and quite recently we heard two good news. On the one hand, that the sovereign rating of a country was upgraded, It would be a common news, but I think that it's not a common news. It's an unusual news when such economies as the economy of the United States is getting downgraded, and of many other European countries. And Mr. Bassanini will talk about it in detail, and he will share the knowledge with us. But for the activity of the bank, is reflected in that per $1, it attracted $3-4 of the attracted investments, and it plays a key role in the interbank association of the Shanghai Cooperation of Organization, which includes the Bank of Development of Russia, of China. And I think that the Prime Minister has already mentioned today that the future is that in the future it's quite possible that we shall have the next wave of the financial crisis, and there might be that these financial institutions will play their own role. I want to congratulate all those people who participated in the creation of the Bank of Development. Saud Mambayev was the first president, and Mambayev who worked also later as the president for the Bank of Development, and who played a key role in forming for the bank. Many people work from the very beginning of its establishment. Many people work in other places already, but the Bank of Development is a place which brings up people who are participated in the diversification program of the economy of Kazakhstan. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your very wonderful speech. As you remember, the institutes of development are created in the countries to invest into the commercially attractive projects, but at the same time, they must be sustainable. For Kazakhstan, it's the issue for discussions. Now the floor will be given to Mr. Frank Bassanini, who is the president of the Italian Bank for Development, who works for a long time. And I think that Mr. Bassanini will give us the answer to the question, because he is not only the head of the Bank for Development of Italy, but of the European Club for Long-Term Investments and president of the Astrid Center for Researchers. He delivers lectures in the big University Labiense, and also of 18 books and of more than 300 articles. Mr. Bassanini, you are given the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, ladies and gentlemen, great transformation are expected in the future of the world economy. Countries such as Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Southern Korea, and the Russian Federation are becoming major contributors to global growth alongside the advanced economies. Corporations based in emerging markets are playing an increasing role in global business and cross-border investments. Global imbalances will take new forms. If properly directed, they may move capitals where they are mostly needed, contributing to a more stable global growth. However, they may also become sources of conflicts. The international monetary system will move from a single currency to a multiple currency system. In the next decades, we expect a huge increase of demand for capital investments. All these transformations are changing the way we understand and represent the evolution of world economy. Advanced economies have been strongly affected by the rapid increase of public deficits and public debt during the crisis. The debt's growth was huge, from 78% of GDP in 2005 to 94% in 2009. It is expected to increase even more in the next years, so as to reach a peak of 108% of GDP in 2013 in the advanced country. The opposite is true for emerging economies. During the crisis, the public debt remained more or less constant at 35% of GDP. Huge fiscal consolidation processes are expected for advanced economies. Low growth rates will make it quite challenging from a political point of view. To foster growth needed for fiscal consolidation, Europe is working on plans to attract global private capital to finance infrastructure. To do this, it is necessary to develop a framework of new rules, regulatory, accounting, and fiscal rules, and create new long-term financial instruments so as make European long-term investment attractive to global investors and savings. In particular, accounting rules that are appropriate for investment banks and trading activities are sometimes penalizing for long-term investors and investments. The new Basel III capital requirements and liquidity will probably discourage long-term banking and financial initiative. Moreover, the International Accounting Standard Board mark-to-market philosophy is particularly damaging for long-term investments, attributing instant market values to assets the value of which is by essence based on several years. And the Solvency II directive in Europe, as recently recognized also by the IMF, will discourage insurance companies and pension funds from holding infrastructural assets, not allowing for a proper matching of long-term liabilities and assets on their balance sheets. The need for a new regulatory framework more favorable to long-term investment meets today a broad worldwide consensus in the scientific community among the practitioners, the industry, and the policymakers. At the European political level, has been strongly emphasized by the European Commission following the de Larosière and Monti reports in the communication on the new Single Market Act, on the European investment policy, and on the budget review. Nevertheless, no concrete policy initiative has been launched to correct the pro-cyclical and pro-short-term effects of the current regulatory framework. In Europe operate a number of large long-term institutional investors with a public sector mandate which act principally as development bank. They are catalysts in attracting private sector financing for strategic long-term investment in the fields of infrastructure, R&D and innovation, TLCs, and supporting medium and large strategic firms, and social development. Their role is crucial to guarantee a sustainable and balanced economic growth, given the difficulties to fund investments of this size solely from public resources, particularly in many industrialized economies with structural budget constraints on public finances. Thus, during the crisis, these long-term institutional investors have enacted a number of initiatives to support the economy by providing liquidity to the banking system, by providing longer duration to project financing initiatives throughout the creating of long-term equity funds, by providing guarantee schemes for the debt of project financing initiatives, by supporting SMEs through private equity funds and guarantees, by creating government's own private equity funds to medium and large firms in strategic sectors of the economy. Since they have a public mandate, although profit makers, the main European development banks like European Investment Bank, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, the French CDC, the Italian CDP, the Spanish ICO, the German KfW, are considered to be more policy-oriented than purely business-oriented. One of the core activities of this institution is in the financing of infrastructure. In this sector, they have been particularly important in the post-crisis market condition, especially in supporting the market while traditional sources of senior debt for infrastructure investments were severely constrained. The support against credit crunch and to the lack of supply of equity for infrastructure have been one of the main objectives of these institutions during and after the crisis. Action to overcome this situation, in fact, has been taken by European development banks to reanimate the equity, the debt, and the capital market for infrastructure. They are traditionally thought of as long-term investors, since they can hold assets in their long-dated portfolios over potential financial crises, thus substantially enhancing market stability by providing a counter-cyclical buffer. Due to their long-term perspective and return targets, these institutions have contributed in smoothing short-term volatility, which is reflected in their substantial presence in the long-term and/or illiquid segment of the market. In fact, these investors have a robust capital base which relies mainly on reserve accumulation and enables them to absorb short-term fluctuation in financial markets. Moreover, are characterized by a low reliance on short-term market liquidity due to stable resources often made of regulated or guaranteed deposits, long-term savings products, or long-term borrowing. They generate stable cash flows over longer periods and financially sustainable long-term risk-adjusted rates of return. Moreover, they are complementary and not in competition with other market participants. They offer to the market institutional sponsoring and economically and financial patronage. These institutions have indeed emerged as new drivers of the European economic and industrial policies. They do not only have a crucial role in the financing of infrastructure, but also in the support of enterprises. They have developed effective instruments both for medium and large strategic firms and SMEs. On the front of large and medium enterprises, some European countries, such as France and Italy, have recently created large private equity funds owned by their large national public sector development banks, such as the French Fonds Stratégique d'Investissement and the Italian Fondo Strategico Italiano. Its objective is the acquisition of equity minority holdings in companies of significant national interest for their country to support growth, contribute to the creation of national champions, also through the consolidation of small and medium enterprises in larger ones, improve operational efficiencies and international competitiveness. They are new market-conform instruments of industrial policy. In particular, they could represent a vehicle through which a new and different industrial policy can be designed. On the front of the support of SMEs, most of the European development banks have created private equity funds, venture capital funds, guarantee schemes, and funds to provide liquidity to banks. They have also developed products both for equity and for debt. On the debt side, different innovative financial instruments are being developed and designed by European development banks, such as the loan guarantee instrument for trans-European transport network projects, the risk-sharing financing facility, and the project bonds. The principal idea behind the Europe 2020 Project Bond Initiative is to provide the European Union support to project companies issuing bonds to finance large-scale infrastructure projects. The initiative aims to attract additional private sector financing of individual infrastructure projects by improving the rating of the senior debt of project companies, thereby ensuring that this can be placed as bonds with institutional investors. The Commission's key role will be risk-sharing with the European Investment Bank or other financing partners enabling them to provide guarantees or loans to support such bonds. Let me conclude with a few words on Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. Cassa Depositi e Prestiti is the largest development bank in Italy. It is 70% owned by the government and 30% by a group of private banking foundations. With almost $343 billion of total assets, is one of the largest long-term financial institutions, focused mostly on financing infrastructure and the support of SMEs. CDP operates by providing both debt and equity. On the corporate equity side, CDP is the main shareholders of major national companies, including listed companies such as Eni and Terna, the national transmission grid. Special type of long-term equity funds, the Margaret Fund for the European area and the Inframed Fund for the MENA area, have been recently launched by CDP together with the European development banks, the European Commission, and other financial institutions. They are long-term equity funds for infrastructure, energy, and climate change, with a duration normally longer than the market operations are willing to take, with a non-speculative IRR, and with a general policy-oriented philosophy. They are designed in order to support market funds by taking longer positions and by lowering the overall cost of capitals. To conclude, Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, together with a network of large development banks and the European Commission, is very interested in the process of internationalization. It is active in creating a friendly regulatory framework for long-term investment and is structuring and promoting financial products to attract global capital to finance investment in Europe and all over the world. But Cassa Depositi e Prestiti and the other European development banks are also very keen in evaluating potential investment opportunities abroad by structuring and co-financing initiatives in high-growth emerging economies like Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech. And I think that there is a lot of information for us to think about for our institutions of development. And today, as you know, the locomotive of the world economy are the developing countries, and developed countries make a huge context in the market of new technologies. The issue of attraction of new technologies is on the front line. And now let me give the floor to the expert in IT, Sumetra Dutta.
По бизнесу и технологиям. Он активно участвует в разработке политики на национальном и европейском уровнях.
Many of his researches are devoted to the strategy of the innovations and technologies, and he's the author of the articles on management, and he's a member of the World Forum of the Management, and I think that Mr. Dutra will make his speech about the development of ITs and new technologies.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for your kind introduction. I would like to congratulate the Development Bank on its 10th anniversary. Certainly, Kazakhstan has arrived on the global stage. From Davos to other international meetings, people talk about the potential of the country, and I'm sure the Development Bank has played a very important role in helping improve the brand image and also recognition of the country's achievements outside the country. Now, as was mentioned, I spend a lot of my own time researching issues in global innovation. And one of the publications I produce is this Global Innovation Index that is produced in collaboration with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, in Geneva, and also with the support of Alcatel-Lucent and Booz and Company. Now, in this publication, we researched the innovation capacities and potential of about 125 economies around the world, including Kazakhstan. And this provides us a very sort of objective way to assess both the potential and the actual innovation output in different economies around the world. So I'll share with you some results from this research. But in my comments, I wanted to make 3 points. The first point is Kazakhstan has made good progress, but needs to do much more in improving its innovation efficiency. The second point is very much linked to the focus on modernization of the economy, diversification of the economy, phrases that were mentioned earlier, is that clearly natural resources is a strength of the country and will remain so in the future. But there's a lot more that can be done in terms of value adding value to the existing strengths in natural resources. And the third point really is linked to new sectors of the economy, new industries that will emerge tomorrow and that are very important for diversification of the economy and preparing the economy for the future. So let me just talk about the first point, which is innovation efficiency. Let me see if I can move the slide. Okay. Now, in the research that we produce every year, and I have a copy of the publication out here, you can download the publication online for free if you go to globalinnovationindex.org, so globalinnovationindex.org. And in this publication, we have a comprehensive model that we use for understanding the innovation potential and results. The model has 5 input pillars, 5 input conditions that we think are important for an economy to successfully innovate. We call them the input pillars. And then we have 2 output pillars, which represent the outputs of successful innovation. And they capture both the traditional technology-oriented outputs and also, very important, the more creative sector outputs that today are also seen as a very important part of innovation. We combine the two to get a result on the overall innovation capacity of an economy. Now, each one of these pillars, of course, is broken down into sub-pillars and variables, but let me just go and show you the result. Now, if you look at the top countries in the world, the top 10 countries show a relatively healthy mix of economies from around the world. So you have economies from North America, from Asia, and from Europe. So it shows you very clearly that innovation is becoming a global phenomenon today. It's no longer the privilege of a small selective group of countries. In fact, even emerging low-income economies like China today come in the top 30. China is ranked at position 29. Now, in yellow, you see the rank of Kazakhstan, and there are 3 cylinders out there. The cylinder at the very back shows the rank in the input conditions. The cylinder at the very front shows the rank on the output conditions, and the cylinder in the middle shows the overall rank in the innovation index. Now, these 3 cylinders' relative positions are interesting because that relates to the first message. If you look at the overall rank of Kazakhstan is 84, but more important, on the input conditions, it is in fact ranked 64. On the output, it is ranked 103. So what you start seeing is that Kazakhstan has made investments in building up its supporting infrastructure for enabling innovation, but not a lot of actually that investment has moved on to actual outputs. So there's an issue of translation of this innovation input conditions into innovation outputs. Now, this is something which we also capture in this slide, which is termed as the efficiency of innovation. So it's a simple measure of the output by the input. And if we look at the median score for this is 0.7 across all the different countries in the world, represented by that vertical dotted line. And then you have some countries on the right of this line, and these countries are more efficient in translating the inputs to the outputs. And then you have some countries which are less efficient in translating the inputs to the outputs. And Kazakhstan, in yellow out there, is on the left. So that's the first point I wanted to make, that based on objective data, you get the result that the innovation efficiency of the country can be improved. There is work to be done. The input conditions are being improved, but we have to work more on the linkages between the input conditions and the output. And of course, the different things you can do on that dimension. The second point I wanted to make is on the value addition. As I said earlier, it's quite natural the economy of the country will be dominated by natural resources for a long time, and that's, only appropriate given the strengths of the natural advantages which the economy benefits from. But at the same time, there's enormous amounts of additional value that can be created on the basis of the existing strengths that you have. Let me take the example of a country which is relatively small and at the same time considered very innovative, a country in the Middle East called Israel. Now, if you look at Israel's main export 20 years ago, Israel's main export 20 years ago was oranges. They used to grow oranges and export oranges. And they used to export about $20 million worth of oranges. Now, today, in 2011, 2010, Israel is very much seen as a high-tech country, a country with high-tech exports. And today, Israel still exports oranges. So it still exports $20 million worth of oranges roughly. But what is interesting is around this $20 million worth of orange export, it also exports about $1 billion worth of high technology related to how do you grow oranges, how do you have agriculture in desert-like environments, in low water environments, in desert-like environments, how do you successfully grow crops? There's a whole technology which Israel has invented, and these industries have an export of $1 billion, which overall is, very, very large as compared to the initial sort of $20 million orange export. So there's enormous potential for value addition that can happen on the basis of traditional resources or traditional sectors, agriculture or in other kinds of related sectors. The third point I wanted to make is around diversification. And today you see this phenomena happening worldwide. Even in oil-rich economies in the Middle East, if you look at Abu Dhabi, for example, Abu Dhabi realizes that they have to invest in renewable energy. So that's the reason why they have created Masdar. Masdar is this enormous experiment to try and see, can we come up with new forms of renewable energy which will set the trend for the future. Now, economies today are understanding that the future will be different, and the future will really rely on knowledge. Knowledge-based sectors, knowledge-based economies will be very critical for the future. Now, one country that has made the successful transformation from which we can learn some useful results is Finland. Now, Finland, 20 years ago, once again was an economy based on natural resources. The economy was largely around paper, rubber, pulp, and other kinds of natural products. And today, Finland is very much seen as another high-tech economy. How did the transformation happen? What happened was, with the fall of the Soviet Union, Finland suffered a very strong recession in the early 90s. And what happened was that the entire country came together, the government, the industry, civil society, and they said that we have to change the economy of the country to a knowledge-based economy. It was a conscious decision made at the highest levels of the country, and as a result of that, they set in place a whole set of actions. There's a committee set up by the Prime Minister to lead the entire change process. They got the various leaders of industry to come in and participate in the process. And of course, they had good foundations, education and macroeconomics and so on. So they're very good foundations to build upon, but there was a conscious national decision to move and transform the economy. So economy was transformed successfully, and today Finland's economy looks very different. Other countries have made similar conscious choices to move towards a very high-tech or knowledge-intensive sectors. Examples will include Korea, examples will also include Singapore and other nations we can take examples from. But this kind of a national directional change, driven and supported by a consensus of government, business, society, is seen as something very important today for the future diversification of the country. So I think those are the 3 points I wanted to make. The innovation efficiency of the country, there is work to be done. Good progress has been made, but more can be done. The second is, let's try to see how can we add more value to our current industries, the current strengths in natural resources that we have. Israel is one example of that, but there are other examples that exist. And the third is, if we want to move towards a more modern, more diversified, knowledge-intensive future, this will require coordinated national strategy, coordinated action across the key players in the economy, as is shown in the case of other countries that have made successful transition. Thank you very much.
A very important speech. Last year and this year, as you know, the head of the country conducted special meetings devoted to the innovations development, and in the result of them, a new law was made on science, innovations and development, and on the 4th of December we had the forum devoted to the issue of innovations, and there would be the policy made, and I hope that next year we shall see the increase of our rating in this area. Anyway, let's continue our discussions, and today, although the time for our plenary session is finished, I want to give the floor to our biggest and important partner, the Внешэкономбанк Bank of Russia. As you know, they are the partners pertaining to the customs union. We are creating the single economic space, and for us, it's a partner which plays an important role. So in terms of the correlation between the economies of our country, I want to give the floor to the expert who has a huge experience in the sphere, who is the deputy chairperson of the Внешэкономбанк and a member of the corporation of Внешэкономбанк. And I want him to tell us what is the role of Внешэкономбанk in organization of economy of the Russian Federation, what are the tasks set up by the government. Thank you. I want to join the words of congratulations on the occasion of the Jubilee of the Bank for Development of Kazakhstan. And I want to say that you are our long-term partners, colleagues, and friends. Quite recently, we conducted a joint seminar. And in spite of the fact that Внешэкономбанк has celebrated its 90th anniversary, but it acts only the last 4.5 years as a bank for development. and it passed through the stages of forming, and during our development, we used the experience of the Kazakhstani Bank for Development, and I want to tell you that we had quite fruitful meetings, discussions, and many procedures, approaches, and missions between all the banks are similar. And I want to say that not only our banks are so much alike, but many banks of development are similar. But there are certain differences. And the respected by me, Kairat Kelimbetov raised the issue with commercial banks should compete with the banks for development. I don't see anything dreadful about it, because in the final end, it will be to the benefit of our economies, and the cost parameters will decrease. As for the joint participation of the banks of development and commercial banks, unfortunately in Russia, such a syndicated crediting is not developing. Each bank tries to choose the projects and to invest alone, on their own, and to implement the projects. But I think that it's not good. And I can give you just a short list of the projects which were implemented in the Russian Federation based on the principles of the syndicated crediting. It's a project for modernization of Pulkovo Airport, where Внешэкономbank Bank acted as the Institute for Development and gave a signal effect, after which other co-funding institutions joined us. And that I want to say that I understand that jointly with the Bank for Development of Kazakhstan, we have similar problems from the point of funding for our projects, because unfortunately, in difference to the Italian Bank of Development or French Bank of Development, where they say they have a quite wide range of instruments to attract long-term resources for the projects. We, for example, as a Bank for Development of the Russian Federation, we have the only source for funding borrowings in the Russian and in the international markets for capital. The same Bank of Development of Germany, for example, starting from 50s, it has the state warranties for borrowings and can attract the resources for on a privileged basis and conditions. And finally, before the coffee break, I understand that everybody wants to go to coffee break. I want to say that special role our bank plays, and it's not only our point of view, it's the point of view of the international experts. Our bank played a special role during the crisis, and it demonstrated and acted as a locomotive not only during the economic growth of the country, but especially in the period of the crisis. And we refunded around $11 billion for the credits of the biggest Russian enterprises, which and we didn't allow to sell the Russian assets abroad. On the one hand, it's on the one hand, and on the other hand, the money were returned to the international banks, and the crisis impacts were reduced. And at present, given the positive development which happened with Внешэкономbank, we started to act as organizers for institutes of development. In particular, we created the National Expert Agency of the Russian Federation, which is a 100% subsidiary for us, and the Institute of Development for Investments, which is also a branch of our bank, which must co-fund big projects jointly with big international investors. And again, congratulations, thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for your congratulations, for your very interesting speech, and I think that we must sum up the plenary session and leave for the coffee break. The conference happens at a very important time for Kazakhstan. You know that after the crisis which happened in the 2008, the president of the country gave the task to develop the strategy for development of Kazakhstan up till 2010 and identified the objectives for modernization of our economy and to through the innovative economy orientation. And for implementation of the strategy, a 5-year plan was adopted for innovative development, and this year it's already the second year that the program is being implemented, and we are summarizing the achievements for the first phase, and the last year 152 projects were launched, and this year 237, and all in all we shall have 6 innovation projects. And you know that for implementation of the projects, we need the national capital and the foreign investments, and we have the program roadmap for business 2020, program for IT's development, and the program for attraction of foreign investments, and the plan on energy efficiency, and the program on the productivity growth. These are the new indicators for the national economy development, and this year we see that the national capital and the foreign investors and the state companies take an active role in the implementation of the president's program. Important role is played by the National Fund of Wealth of the country, Samruk-Kazana, which implements big projects, Holding Kazagro, which implements projects in the agricultural area, and the Bank of Development, National Innovative Fund, Kaznex Invest, and a number of other institutions. And I think that we see we see that in Brazil, China, in Korea, the state institutes of business support the economy development of the countries. And what should be the role of our institute at this stage of development? What the objectives will be set up by the head of the country, and what mechanisms for support of the investments should be made accessible, and what are the mechanisms of cooperation with the banking sector. We have heard so many new opinions about how it happens in other countries, and I hope that during the next sessions we shall hear to some other new proposals pertaining to these issues, and we shall be able to discuss them.